The idea of happiness has grown in the United Arab Emirates in recent years, with the country appointing a Minister of State for Happiness in 2016. It also launched the National Program for Happiness and Well-being that year. Now the question is, what makes the Emiratis happy? Well, my guest today is Dr. Louise Lambert, who did a study on the concept of happiness among Emirati students a few years ago. Today, I will talk to her about the findings of the study and also happiness in general. She's a registered psychologist from Canada and an associate professor in the Department of Social Sciences at Canadian University, Dubai. She's the director of happiness programming at Happiness Matters, a Dubai-based advisory firm. She's also the founder and editor-in-chief of the Middle East Journal of Positive Psychology. Dr. Lambert, welcome to the program and thanks for joining me.
Welcome.
You are a registered psychologist from Canada. So how did you end up working in the field of happiness and positive psychology in the UAE?
Yeah. So I kind of got here a little bit by accident, I think. So I was practicing in Canada and I was practicing in primary healthcare. So working with a lot of patients who struggled with depression. And I thought, you know what, they just keep coming back over and over and over again because our treatments are good at reducing depression, but not necessarily increasing happiness. So at the same time, I was doing a doctorate degree and I took a course in positive psychology, and that sort of changed my whole mindset. And I was like, wow, this is what I've always wanted to do. So I developed a positive psychology intervention program for the clients I had at the time. We ran it like an experiment. We published that study. It was very effective. And then I just thought, I think I'm onto something here. So we quickly just carried on replicating the program. And then shortly after, I just got in my head, I wanted to come here for whatever reason. And then I brought over positive psychology with me and opened the journal actually when I arrived, because I felt it was important that there was a platform for positive psychology research that was not here before. And I wanted to really send home the message that, we can do our own research here, and research should be about people and for people, and not just copies of Western science that get duplicated and don't always fit as well.
You wanted to do it in the context of Middle East, especially United Arab Emirates, and not import what they say in the West to this region.
Exactly, because I saw right away there were cultural differences, and we can always assume there are cultural differences, but there are differences in how people understand happiness. There are differences in how people pursue happiness. There are differences even in whether people feel it's important and even valuable to do so. So this is kind of an assumption we have that everybody wants to be happy, but nobody wants to be unhappy, but it doesn't have the same urgency in other places as it might in the West. So again, I didn't really understand what those dynamics were. And, even though you live in a place or you're from a place, it doesn't necessarily mean you understand them either. So I just really felt that we needed more psychological research to unpack some of these concepts and ideas and really understand what is happiness here, and how does it look, and what do people do about it.
Glad they got someone like you who wanted to do this kind of.
I think it's a question off everybody's mind. Anybody could have done it, but I just was like, hey, I think we're onto something here.
The idea of happiness is growing, as I said in the introduction, at the national level. In the United Arab Emirates, the country has taken a lot of measures in this regard. For example, it had appointed a Minister of State for Happiness, and it also launched the National Program for Happiness and Well-being. So what impacts are these measures creating on the citizen community well-being? What are you observing there?
I think the biggest thing I've seen is just an awareness that it's a thing. And, we've seen that here, but, we've even seen that globally. The more we talk about well-being, the more we talk about happiness, the more we talk about positive emotions, it really brings it alive that actually this does matter. And it is a thing, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Why are we living life if it's not a worthwhile life? Like, what's the point? And there are ways in which we can do that. So I think it's really raised the idea, the concept, and it's made people talk about it a lot. So maybe at first people were like, happiness. Like, okay, this is a little bit silly. And certainly that's the response I got a lot. People are like, you're a proper psychologist and you're studying happiness. Like, that's kind of stupid. So, it made it, it gave it legitimacy and made it a serious thing. And now people really do see it as a serious thing. So I think over the years, we've moved past the smiley faces, and now we're really looking at science and research and implementation, intervention, measurement. So it's become a serious thing, actually, and that's to watch. That evolution has been really cool. So now schools are taking it seriously. I would say practically every school in the country has some form of well-being programming, whether that's positive education or otherwise. Many organizations, not all, we still have a long way to go, but many organizations now, again, it's a thing. So at least we're talking about, the well-being of employees and what does that look like, how to make that happen. Some get it, some are, they're still kind of moving up that evolution. Government policy as well. So there's a difference in tone. So now it's very much about what is in the best interest of people, what is going to ensure their well-being over time, what is going to ensure the sustainability of well-being over the years. So it's really shifted the focus to what matters, and it's not money. I mean, yes, that matters, but there's more to life than just that. So I think we're having really good conversations around, what makes life worth living. And this I find really interesting.
So you did this study on happiness among the students in the United Arab Emirates, and also there were students from other Arabian countries in that study. And the participants were asked two questions. The first one was, what does happiness mean to you? And the second one was, how do people in your culture think of happiness? So now, can you discuss the results of both questions for both?
Yeah. So I did that study in 2015. It was one of the first studies. And, again, when we don't know enough about something, we start with a descriptive method, just trying to figure out like what's going on. So yeah, it was just a very simple question. What is happiness to you? And what struck me immediately was the absence of the word I. So when you ask that question in the West, everybody's like, oh, when I do this, when I do that, my goals, my dreams, my emotions. And here that did not happen. It was when my parents are proud of me, when my sister is happy, then I'm happy. When my family, accomplishes a goal or like sometimes it's about social standing. Or when I feel that, I'm doing the right thing in God's eyes, right? So it was very different. I didn't expect to get those responses. So that was kind of eye-opening. I'm like, wow, there's something really different here. And then in terms of how do people in my culture see happiness, that one was a little bit maybe more like other countries. People said, oh, I think people in my culture think happiness is about money. Probably I'd say that about the West as well. Or, oh, I think people think happiness is about, competition, accomplishment, being the best, being number one, reaching goals. I think many of us might say that. So question number 2 is a little bit less insightful because it's our perceptions of what we think others think, and our perceptions are often wrong or could be wrong. But definitely that first question really made me see that how happiness is conceptualized is not the same everywhere. And of course, I just, did these two, the West and here, but I'm sure that's the case in many places. How we understand happiness is different.
Yeah, exactly. And in your study, you wrote this, that collectivist societies seek happiness through one another. And that actually explains why in the UAE, when you asked questions like, what is happiness to you? So they responded with answers like, happiness, my happiness depends on my family's happiness, or my brother's happiness, or father's happiness, sister's happiness, my mom's happiness. So this is also the case in Bangladesh. and India, and also this part of the world, so because we are the collective, we are highly collective. So our idea of identity always depends on someone else. So we are always someone's brother, someone's mother, someone's husband, someone's wife, But when I was in Finland, it was like, okay, I'm me, this is me. Because the idea, because this is very individualistic, in Finland. So they say, and I think also in most of the Western countries, so they say, this is me. So as you said, my dream, my goal, my accomplishment, my job, my plan, this is what I want to do. And in this part of the world, it's all about, okay, I want to do these things for my parents. I want to buy my sister or my wife or my husband a gift that will actually make me happy. So this is something I really found interesting, because I don't know much about the United Arab Emirates, but through your study findings, when I read it, then I understood, okay, they're almost like us, like the Bangladeshis,
It's collective. Yeah. And of course, if that's how you understand happiness is through others, that has implications for how you become happy. So if you're an individualist, becoming happy might be, the path might be a little bit clearer because there's only you to worry about. You just do what you want. Now, the consequences of that are that maybe if you fail, you feel worse because then you have nobody to blame but you. But in a collective society, the path might be a little bit more complicated because you don't want to disappoint your mother. Maybe your mother wants this, but your uncle wants that and your sister wants this, and then you're like, wow, how do I make this happen? So it becomes a little bit more complicated. On the other hand, if you fail, at least you have plenty of people to blame. So there's less individual responsibility. At the same time, there's less individual responsibility.
So you find the influence of religion in the idea of happiness in the UAE, right? So you wrote in your study that the religion plays a very big role in the lives of Emirati people.
Yeah, so, and for sure that came out in the responses as well. Again, in great contrast to the West, you rarely hear religion in Western responses. Not that it's not a part, but it's just not very common. But here, it was a big thing, and it was I feel happiest. And again, they could define happy however they wanted. So I feel content. I feel at peace. I feel satisfied, when I'm praying, or when I'm fulfilling, my duties, my religious duties. When I feel I have a pure heart, a white heart was the expression, meaning I haven't done anything wrong. I have nothing to feel guilty about. I'm living my life morally the way I should. I'm leading a straight path. So not being tempted or pulled into activities that might lead to sin. So feeling like you were living in accordance to your values was also really important. That congruence with what I believe and what I do fits, and it's also approved of by my religion and also my family, which would be part of that same collective unit. So it was really eye-opening for me, because again, that's not how we see it in the West. But it's not about the West and others. It's about research tends to be Western, and the research tends to sort of put forward, well, this is how happiness goes. This is what happiness is. And we put it forward as though, well, this is normal. This is what the whole world does. It's not. So we have to remember that in psychology, 95% of the research comes from Western countries. So if you're anywhere else reading this, you think that's normal. Well, now suddenly you're like, well, that doesn't fit for me. Gosh, am I the problem here? No, you're not. It's that research is Western. So that's also why I open this journal to, have a broader representation of voices that were non-Western, to sort of challenge some of these findings so that everybody can see themselves as normal.
I get
in
that.
print.
I get that. So what was the state of workplace happiness in the UAE when you arrived many years ago, and how has it developed since then? What big changes do you see?
So it just wasn't a thing, at all. It wasn't to the point where I didn't do anything in organizations when I arrived, because I tried and people were like, Happiness at work?
What does that even mean?
What does that even mean? That's not even a thing. You're at work. You're supposed to be miserable, right? And I think that is still the case in some organizations. So part of the challenge here is that, as you know, in the UAE, we have just under 200 nationalities. So everybody comes with their school of thought, what is normal, their philosophies on life, and these all kind of make a big mix. And depending on which organization you're in and what is the major influence, that might come up in discussion or might never come up in discussion. So part of happiness at work is also influenced by just how we see work in itself. So for some nationalities, work is where you go to be great, where you go to develop your career and your profession, and where you go to make something of yourself. And for other cultures, work is work. It's a job. It's where you get a paycheck and that's the end. And you just do your job. And when you're done, you go home. Like there's nothing more. So I think in parallel, happiness at work has also challenged the notion of what is work for? So that has started to grow as well. But I know today where we're at, and I know this just because next week we're launching a big report on this. People, okay, if you publish this in 2 weeks, then I'll say it. And we have to wait till the report comes out first. But the UAE has. I will publish. Okay. The UAE has the highest quit rate in the world.
Okay.
People quit their jobs here at the highest rate of any country in the world. And second, we have the highest intentions to quit than any other country in the world. So from an organizational perspective, that's not good. But from an individual perspective, that tells me people are understanding what is well-being now. Part of that's also pandemic, but people are just saying, no, life is too short. I'm not doing this, or I'm not doing this way. So people are really prioritizing that work-life balance, being respected at work, having good relationships at work, feeling good at work, functioning well at work, flexible work, and people want the best of both. They want a good life and they want a good work life, and they're ready to make that happen. So I think that's good news. It's, a little bit like, oh, we're the highest quitters, but it's kind of good, because what it means is that well-being really matters, and people are willing to take action on that and say no.
Yep, I understand.
So,
I understand.
Yeah.
I have a question that comes to mind right now. So is this like, because you say they're big quitters, so they just quit the job. Is it because they have a strong social safety net like the Nordic countries, and that's why they can do it? Because in Bangladesh,
no, we have no social net here.
Okay, but still they just quit. And is it easy to get a job again if they just quit? There's something like that.
To be fair, in the UAE, yes, the economic outlook is good. Jobs are hiring. I mean, things have really moved. I think we're doing better than even before a pandemic. So I think that helps a lot. So people are kind of like, you know what? No. And then they have another job right away lined up, or they're just going home. Because if you don't have a job here, you can't stay really. So no, it's not because of the safety net, but in the Emirati population, they have that safety net and they're quitting a lot as well. So it's just across the board. People are just saying like, no. But I agree. If you need something to fall back on, because money matters, of course. You have to live and eat, right?
Yeah, exactly. Because when you were saying this, I was thinking about my country, because in my country, now I'm doing a job. And if you say, I mean, even if it's a toxic workplace, I cannot just quit, it just doesn't happen, because I need to get a job again. And it's not that easy. If you quit a job and then you start looking for another job, it may not be that easy. And well, it is not that easy to get a job again. And when you are employed and you are looking for a new job, then it might be easier. But then again, you just can't quit, because
it's a risk.
It's a huge risk. It's a huge risk.
Yeah.
So there's a big deal here. So anyway, what are the key differences between cultural concepts of happiness in the UAE and your home country, Canada? Why do you personally feel happier among the two countries?
Oh, that's hard to, they're so vastly different. And also because I haven't lived in Canada for many years. I went home this summer, and I think probably most expats might feel the same way. After a number of years, you go home and you just think, well, I don't really fit here anymore.
Yeah.
Because I change, but it also changes. And Canada has changed in ways that I don't really feel comfortable with. I've grown to really like the UAE. I love the UAE. I mean, this is my home. But it really embraces diversity. I mean, we have 200 nationalities. It can't not. But people are welcome and respected. Come as you are, dress as you are, speak as you are, whatever. Wash your hands. That's all, right? So it's very respectful and tolerant, and I feel like maybe the West is becoming a little bit less so. So I think for me, happiness is here. I feel good with these values. I wish it wasn't so hot. I'm a snow baby, so I don't do very well in the heat. But no, I'm happy here.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
happy here. Yeah,
I
I like that
understand.
openness and that energy and that view on the world versus just the view of your
Mm,
little circle. Yeah,
mm,
I
mm,
really like that.
mm, mm. Do you feel like you can ever feel like a true Emirati if you live there for like another 10 or 20 years?
No, because I speak a little bit of the language, but I also feel culture is something you're born into. I mean, certainly, yes, you can adopt it, but in this culture, or sorry, in this country in particular, the Emiratis are about 10% of the
Mm,
whole country. So it is small. So we're not necessarily in their culture. I would say we're beside it, as they are beside ours. So that's a little bit different. Um, but yeah, no, no, definitely not. And I wouldn't want to be like, oh yeah, I know. No, I'm not going to be arrogant about it. That is theirs. Um, and I respect it. Like there's a lot of really great things about it. It just, I'm not born into it. That it's not who I am. Um, but I appreciate who I've become here within the ecosystem that they've built for us. So I'll
mm.
say that.
Yeah, I get it. So, do you have another 5 minutes? I will ask you the last
Yeah,
question.
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay. So, your positive psychology intervention study that you did, I think,
Mm-hmm.
a few 4 years ago, I guess. So, it
Yeah.
showed some sustainable improvements to the students' hedonic and eudaimonic well-being over a 3-month
Yep.
period. So, can you tell me more about this study and also its findings?
Yeah. So that's kind of what I do. I set up happiness programs, if you will, although I don't really like the word happiness, but anyway, yeah, so I test out what are called PPIs, positive psychology interventions. And these are just different strategies that have already been validated in the research literature. So we know that they work, more or less. And I try to test them in this cultural context, whether that's on expatriate students or Emirati students or whoever. And I will be testing these in workplaces like starting next week. So I'm excited about that as well. And we, as you said, we measure two different types of happiness. So hedonic happiness is the type you feel right here, right now. So I always say that's kind of the Twinkie bar type of chocolate. So it's a instant hit of happiness, but it disappears quickly. Eudaimonic happiness is, my students laugh at this, but it's the type of happiness that feels miserable. So it's the happiness you feel when you're training for a marathon. That's not joyful, but it does make you grow as a person. And of course, when you reach the goal at the end, you feel really good. So more about self-actualization, meaning, purpose, and whatnot. So yeah, that particular study, I did a semester-long program with the students, testing both types of happiness, different interventions that tap onto those. And then we just simply saw what happened at the end relative to another class or a few classes that got nothing. And what we found is a few interesting things. So fear of happiness is a thing here as well. So I always test for that one. So the fear of happiness dropped, and subjective well-being, life satisfaction, the experience of positive emotions increased relative to the control group, and also 3 months after the end of the program as well. So that's good news, because it's easy to make people feel good, but it's also easy for that good to disappear quickly. So this really told us that this lasts, and these could be really good interventions that universities could use, organizations could use to teach people the skills of happiness, because we know that they last over time. And the research, so I just did 3 months post, but the research literature has tested these about a year out, and we know that they also hold those gains over time as well.
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Lambert. Thanks for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. It's great to meet you. And yeah, all the best with your endeavor. I look forward to seeing this interview, but also to check out your other interviews as well. Thank you.
Oh, yeah, sure. Thank you. Goodbye. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.